be sharing with you some insights into the AWS Cost Usage Report and how you can get the most out of this data. This comes from my experience as a commercial architect at AWS and as my previous role as the head of FinOps at KPMG UK. So a little bit of background about me. I work in a team called Optics and we look after global strategic accounts, and I mainly focus on telco customers at AWS. So what does a commercial architect actually do? Well, there are four main areas. First, cost optimization, a favourite amongst customers. So we help identify savings for customers and make sure that they stay on track to optimise their spend at AWS. We also look at helping them develop financial processes. So some customers that have moved to the cloud and are unsure about the new flexibility of purchases or how to do things like chargeback, we can help them with that. We also like to develop a cost-aware culture. So that means bringing together people from finance, developers, managers, and making them sure they can speak one language together. And this could involve things like trainings or FinHack days. And finally, industry best practices. So this is a great area. As I mainly work with telco, I can see what's going on across the entire industry and share that back with my customers to get the most out of it. So you may be thinking, and I've been asked this recently, why has AWS hired someone to specifically help customers save money? Well, to quote Jeff, we don't make money when we sell things, we make money when we help customers make a purchase decision. And this is really true when it comes to AWS. We want businesses to thrive, and one way of doing this is making them more cost-aware and cost-efficient. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, there are three areas we're going to look at. First of all, getting the data, so focusing on the cost and use report and some extra bits. Also pulling out relevant information from your cost and usage report and automating these processes. So I'm sure any developers in the room will be happy to hear that automation is a key part of this talk. I'll also be dropping in some customer experiences with the telco customers and my previous role to give you some more examples of how we've utilised these things. But before we dive into that, I want to highlight an amazing service available at AWS today that is free for you guys to use. The well-architected labs. These are a series of step-by-step guides that help you set up a great series of processes in your accounts. They focus on the five main pillars, so operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. So wherever you see that logo in the top right-hand corner, it means that the thing I'm talking about is actually available as a well-architected lab. And you could go away today, find that lab, and implement it in your organization or your account. So let's get started and focus on how we collect data, especially cost data. Before we go into the cost and usage report, it is worth noting that there are other ways in which you could look at your data. So the main one we see customers use is AWS Cost Explorer. This is a great tool, and if you haven't checked it out already, I really recommend it. It's a way for you to see all of your cost data, filter it, group it by categories, create reports, export them to Excel, and also it contains things like recommendations. So this is something that many people don't know, but there are recommendations in Cost Explorer for right sizing, for ROI and savings plan purchases. And this is a great kind of starting point for people who are on their cloud financial management journey or just want to see how much they're spending on different resources. There's also plenty of things in the marketplace, AWS Marketplace, that can help you look at your costs. And with our partner network, there's so many solutions out there that get you more insight into your billing. If you have access to one of these, I really recommend using them. But did you know that all the data in Cost Explorer stems from the same backend data of your cost and usage report? So how do you guys get access to that raw data? Well, it's a super simple process, starting off with choosing your S3 bucket in which you'd like your data to be placed into and what format. So CSV or Parquet, two of the main ones. This can then be ingested into a database of your choice, so we recommend things like Redshift or Athena, but if you have one of those partner network applications, you might want to put the data and let it accessible through there. Once you have this set up, you can then query and review your data. This might consist of SQL queries in Athena or making custom dashboards in QuickSight. This is really important to get started. Getting your cost and usage report actually set up is the first step into like a cloud financial management journey. And it's really important because once you set it up, it tracks data moving forward and you can't get retrospective data in your cost and usage report easily. So we really recommend going away today, checking if your company has it set up and if you can kind of see what access and what setup it has. This data is really detailed and covers everything from EC2 usage, data transfer, storage, it has it all. And one way we like to see customers add to this data is using cost allocation tags. Now, these are tags you define in your billing portal that will be pulled into your cost and usage report. So say you have an EC2, you tag it with an environment, this data can then be pulled into your cost and usage report, adding in that extra layer of detail. This is great if you have maybe one account with multiple environments set up in it, so prod, dev and test are all there, and you want to see how the different environments are being utilised and the spend in them, but it's all in one account. One thing we did find was that many customers were also doing a more holistic approach to things like chargeback when it came to accounts. So what I mean by that is they were charging everything within an account to a cost centre, a project, an owner. So they didn't really care about the tags specifically for chargeback for individual resources in those accounts. But they couldn't add that data through cost allocation tags. So we came up with a new, well-architected lab to allow users to get that data. So using your organisation, a Lambda goes off and pulls data from that, such as the name of your account, the creation date, the status, and then puts this in an S3 bucket accessible through Athena. You can then attach this to your cost and use report, adding more data. But if you have some unique information, such as business unit, environment, cost center, that you'd like to attach to this account, you can tag it as well, and the Lambda will also pull those in. So allowing you to do things like chargeback or enrich billing reports straight in an automated way. I helped a US customer set this up, and they were astounded at how much work it saved them. Previously, I believe they were using another Excel sheet that they had to manually update with all the relevant kind of tag information or pull it from organizations regularly, then combine it with their bills after, causing them to have a manual process that took a long time. Now they can use this lab and the whole thing is automated and they don't have to worry about it. So now we've got all that cost data and we've enriched it with the customer information that you need. We want to make sure that we're getting the relevant information out of this data. And this will be different for your finance guys, developers, managers. And sometimes we've seen that customers aren't really sure where to start. The cost and use report can be millions of lines long and hundreds of columns. It can be too much data when you get started. So how do you even know where to start? Well, we created a new cost and usage queries library in the well-architected labs. This library was designed by cost and usage report specialists such as myself, TAMs, and customers to bring together many queries that would be useful for customers like yourselves. These queries have been tested and tried against real live data to make sure that they are 100% accurate and ready for you guys to use. A great example is things like reserved instance chargeback or reserved instance reviews of where it is being utilised. So you want to see who's actually using the RIs you've purchased. You can use your cost and use report to do that, and we have a SQL query ready for you to look at that information. We've also started adding some cost optimization queries to the library. So a great one is the GP2 to GP3 cost saving. If you haven't heard, AWS released a new EBS volume type called GP3 in reInvent last year. This is 20% cheaper than the GP2 volume and therefore a great way to make instant savings. Using this query, you can figure out how much you can save in your accounts to see where you should approach first. If you have one account that's maybe using a lot of GP2 that you can make a great saving on, you can find this information. But generally, how are people using the report? Well, the common answer is chargeback. So I've said chargeback a few times, but just to clarify, chargeback is when you want to split down a cost into many different groups. So these could be groups of teams, projects, applications, environments, and you want to be able to break the cost down so they're exactly right so you can charge people what they own of that percentage of the bill. So I worked with a large telco customer to do this. Previously, when they were running chargeback, they were pulling the data from their billing portal in the big Excel sheet, not as big as the incur, but just the big Excel sheet of summarized data. They were then using a Python script to then extract information that they wanted from it and then add in some extra costs. Now, this was a somewhat automated process because they had a Python script, but it involved pulling data, getting it into a different place, and then doing some maths on it. So the way we helped was we checked their cost and use report was fully set up with all the data they needed. We then helped create a custom query that took into account spend, consumption of marketplace, and support fees, so they could have one bill for all of the charges they needed to do. We were then able to test this, verify against their old numbers, and clarify that these were 100% accurate. So going forward, rather than taking the data out of their account and using some Python script, they could just do it all through one SQL query in their AWS account, making their lives so much simpler and more trustworthy. So now we've got all the data and we know what we want to get out of it. How do we make this a more automated process? We don't just want someone running manual SQL tasks every month. It's a waste of time and could leave room for human error. So before we get into the actual automated reporting, we want to make sure that we set it up in the right way. So here are some key things to take into consideration. Number one, reports need to be accurate. Now, this goes without saying, but when you first start moving away from maybe Cost Explorer into CSVs from the incur, people sometimes are a bit skeptical, especially those that are so used to just looking at Cost Explorer. I had this when I worked at KPMG, but we had a customer that was able to look at their own Cost Explorer and was really active in paying attention to that. But when we started sending them a bill that was just one number, they were quite concerned that this didn't match up. This was very similar to the telco customer I mentioned, where the number we were charging them with was a combination of different costs. So it was things like support fees, reserved instance chargeback, and then normal account fees. A useful exercise to build trust with this data is taking a customer or a user or a manager through this process, where you show them the normal view that you have in Cost Explorer, and then the maths and download Excel sheets and show them how you get to the cost of usage report number. This builds trust and allows them to look more at the data you're sending them. Timely. Now, this will be different for different people. So your finance teams will often need your billing report on a certain day of the month so they can put it into SAP and then billing can occur for the rest of the company. But your managers might only want to see the reports quarterly to see how you're doing overall. The key thing with this is asking when people need this data. Without asking them, you'll never know, and you might impact their job in a negative way. Specific. So finance might not care about every resource that you are utilising in the cloud, but they do care about things like cost center. So make sure you ask them to see what data they need to see in what levels of detail. Your developers might want to know how their dev, test and prod are doing. These may be split into different accounts, so you can pull them into one report. The great example of this I have at KPMG was, for many years before I was working in this area, the teams were just getting sent an Excel sheet full of all the billing data, and the poor finance guys had to manually go through, do loads of VLOOKUPs, calculations to aggregate the data into the cost centers we were charging to. One conversation with them, and we figured out that if we could just write a SQL query that did it in the format that SAP needed, we would save hours of work and any potential for human error. This process, I hope, is still going on now, and it's a great way of automating how they were able to ingest the data. Another example, a manager wanted to see how much he was spending on every service in his AWS accounts. And this guy had a lot of accounts, he had about 40, so imagine how many services. It's a lot of data, but that's what he wanted. So we gave him that report every month, and as he looked, he was able to see that he was actually growing his spend in Lambda, even though it wasn't one of his main services. Upon reflection, he found he had a Lambda triggering a Lambda, causing this cycle of Lambda spend. He was able to go in, fix it, and save lots of money. But without seeing this data, he never would have known about it. So it's really key that you ask people what is going to help them do their jobs. You can use a well-architected lab to do automated reporting, such as emails. Great way of no one having to manually go in. You just set the queries you want, and these will be automatically sent out from your Amazon account. But take these items into consideration before you do this. Make sure that you want people to read this data. You don't want them to just delete it as soon as it gets into their inbox. And for those who don't like Excel, we have the last lab I'm going to bring up, which is the Cost Intelligence Dashboard. This is an interactive, customizable dashboard in AWS QuickSight. And it's a really great starting point for your cloud financial management journey. It provides you with all of your data and allows you to play around with it and see what's going on in your account. It's low cost to set up. We're just going, I think it takes about 15 minutes to set up with it. And it's a CloudFormation template which you deploy, and you can see all your data, have access to it all. And because it's just your QuickSight licenses and your storage, it's really cost effective, especially when you're not sure how to get started with cloud and you don't want to invest too much. It's easy to enable. As I said, it's just a CloudFormation template, and the lab will take you through the steps, and it's all set up for you. And it can take advantage of all of your IAM policies and roles that you have set up in your account, so you can allow people to see into the data already as it's in your account. And that's, I think, one of the best things about this, is everything is contained in your accounts. So you know who has access to it, you control the data, it's all at your fingertips. So hopefully this has given you a pathway into thinking about your cost and usage report, different depending on your role. If you have some finance connections or managers or devs, it's really key that you go out and try and find this data. It's relevant to all developers and users of AWS is their cost information. You might want to go away today and talk to people who do have access to this and inquire and see if you can get some reports set up that you would benefit from. Maybe you've got some ideas about how you'd like to see this data. But make sure your business has this set up as soon as possible and see how you can get access to it. So before I finish, I wanted to give some quick tips on things to consider when you're working in this kind of space. The first is use tags where needed. Tagging resources is a great thing to do in your accounts, but you don't want to tag for no reason. I mentioned the cost allocation tags and your account level tags earlier. These are for different things, so make sure when you develop a tag policy, or you're doing chargeback reporting, or you just want to see where you're spending money, you're working as one company to make sure that you're tagging the right information at the right level. This is really key, and we've seen many people make this mistake before, so ask the question, why are you tagging? Inform users and seek feedback. I gave you a couple of examples in my previous role of when this was really important. Ask people what they need when it comes to data, or if you're the person needing the data, tell someone what you actually need. It's really important, like I said, that you don't want emails to be sent or receive emails that are just a waste of space. You want to be able to see the data that's relevant to your job and going to make your life easier. So seek out the cost and use report and find the person who owns it and ask for that SQL query that you need. Or if you own your own account, you could take advantage of the new member cost and usage report. This is something that was announced at reInvent and allows users and customers to create cost and usage reports in your individual accounts, giving you full access to that data. This could be really important if you work at a large company and your organisation level cost and usage report is maybe too detailed or you're not allowed access to it. Having your own cost and use report will allow you to see that really in-depth data, but allow you to kind of control it yourself. Improve performance by using the new Amazon Athena version 2. So this is something that came out relatively recently. I'd really recommend just going in, having a look and upgrading to the new version. It's actually cheaper in some ways to use it, and eventually I believe we will be migrating. So recommend kind of getting ahead on that, making sure your queries still run, and take advantage of the cost saving with the new version. And turn on monitoring for Amazon Athena. So I didn't know this even existed until relatively recently, but if you go into Amazon Athena, you can turn on monitoring like CloudWatch logs, and you can see how you are using your Athena. This is a service that you do pay for, so you want to make sure when you're running queries that they are optimal and that you are utilizing the service to the best of your ability. So last shout out for the well-architected labs. Really recommend going and checking these out. They are so useful, and if you have any feedback or you want to suggest one, please get in contact. There's loads of information on the website. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Stephanie Gooch. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, or my email is there, and just have a good day. I think we're going to do some questions soon. Thank you.
We are indeed going to do some questions. That didn't flip back to my host view automatically as I thought it was going to, which is why you got some dead air there. Also, apologies for those of you who've noticed that there's a bit of stream lag. We've dropped some frames. I've shut down some pieces of software that were sort of useful but kind of stopped being useful at the point at which they started causing me to drop frames. So we are joined actually right now live from somewhere in London, I think, by Stephanie. Welcome, yep. Stephanie. Thanks for the talk. Lots of good stuff in there. Cost management is one of those parts of AWS that is, I guess, arguably to me, way more complicated than actually knowing which services to use where. It's just it's a really big kind of sprawling. I'm going to use the word mess. Sorry, like it's quite confusing. Like, do you tend to find that customers struggle hugely with managing costs.
Yeah, especially when they're new to it. When there's like a lot going on at the start, like I'm breaking up a bit. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So yeah, when people are getting started with cost, it's always a big like, where do you get started with it? And that's part of my job, is kind of helping people to get to that place.
Gotcha. There were some questions in the chat about third-party cost tools, and I think Jabbersoft was asking whether some of the sort of benefit that you get from the third-party tools like Cloud Health will ever find their way into the tooling that AWS provide themselves. What's your take on that?
So we love our partners to get that. Like, we love people using the partners. I have customers that have the partners, and it's a great service because they provide so much information and so much work that we can't do ourselves. They create great dashboards, they create insights, recommendations, everything we need. But for people that are getting kind of started, I like to say maybe try the native things. So things I mentioned, like the cost intelligence dashboard, getting the Cur in, playing around with Cost Explorer, and recommendations that are native, or even Trusted Advisor. Kind of getting started with those things, and then if you need more information, then go to third party. And I think that if there's development work, I know that hopefully we'll have things coming at some point that are more granular, but as long as you guys ask for it, I think that's the best thing about working here and seeing that, is that when people request that they want to see these kind of visuals, they want to see this information, we listen to customers, and we'll make note, raise PFRs, and we'll kind of see if we can get them on the roadmap.
What's a PFR, Steph? That sounds like an Amazon term.
Yes, product feature request. So if you have a support, you can go in and raise a product feature request for whatever you like.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that the other thing that I was surprised about the cost management stuff is that if you are a partner reselling AWS, if you're one of the service provider program partners, you also have to wrangle the cost and usage report on behalf of your customers, and actually they don't get access to their own cost details. I think like it's all rolled up into your partner account. That might be wrong. I might be misremembering, but it. Basically, if you're reselling, you need to be buying third-party tools so that you can understand what's going on and invoice customers. So you mentioned partners. I've just mentioned partners. You also talk about well architected in your talk as well, particularly around the well architected labs. Well architected obviously has a cost pillar. Like, what's your experience with well architected as a sort of general thing?
So I mean, I praise it. I love it. I think it's a great way of kind of going in, and I think John said this before, about going in and seeing, like, getting someone to tell you what's going on in your account that you may not see if you're not used to it. So if you're not a cost specialist, having someone come in and kind of tell you about it is really useful. I remember the first one we had at KPMG, and I didn't know what was going on, but by the end of it, I kind of had learned a lot about a lot of different subjects, because maybe I wasn't focused necessarily on the cost stuff at that time or the security items. So it's a really good kind of tool to get started, whether you're using the well architected tool, the labs, or using it through potentially kind of connections with Amazon.
Yeah, gotcha. And also, like, partners can do well architected reviews with customers as well. We as the Scale Factory have been doing that since about 2018, and it's a really great opportunity to, I guess, for us to go in and learn about what a customer is up to in a really structured way, but also as a kind of learning tool. I think that customers tend to go away learning quite a lot about their infrastructure, and maybe sort of things that they didn't think that they needed to know, they found out they needed to know, and that they don't have good answers for. So cost is often a thing that comes up. Also worth noting that if you do a well architected review with a partner, there is funding available from AWS to support remediation work. So you can sometimes find that having done a review with a cost focus, you could spend some money on that partner to reduce your cost and also have Amazon pay for it, which is another example of Amazon being benevolent and giving away money essentially. So you've obviously seen a lot of stuff in the cost landscape. What's the biggest win you've seen in terms of reducing someone's cost? Oh, we've frozen again. Thank you, Skype. Thank you very much. Let's see whether she comes back. I'm not going to do a dance while that's going on. I'm going to give that another couple of seconds. I'm going to go over to the chat and have a look at some of the conversations in there. discussion about tagging. Yeah, tagging things for cost management, kind of useful. There's a tool called Cloud Custodian, which comes from I can't remember. I think it's one of the credit card people, and that will allow you, similar to AWS Config. Cloud Custodian will let you. My God, Steph, you've just joined us from the dark. What's happened?
Guys,
your power gone out.
I've had a black. Yeah.
Amazing.
The
Why don't you pop your video off, Steph? Because your bandwidth isn't great on the phone. So maybe pop your video off, and we'll see if we can go by chat. Biggest win on cost remediation.
Remediation. So I think when I was at KPMG, we had kind of a lot of opportunities to save money because we've been growing and no one had really taken the time to look back and see where we could save money. And I threw a series of just kind of reviewing accounts and looking at, I think our shared services account had tons of snapshots in them. And these snapshots had been there for years. Like they were snapshots of Jura from 2015, and this was in 2019. And it was just burning money. And we kind of just wrote a script, went through it, and deleted all the stuff that we knew we didn't need anymore. And the snapshots, I remember just dropping dramatically in cost. I can't remember the exact amount right now, but you could literally see it in Cost Explorer. And the impact that we were able to show, like, okay, now we've done that, let's put in data lifecycle management so that we can keep this stop this doing this in the future is really important. And that was really a big win because we also were able to share that with a lot of people. And then they were like, oh, let's just check our accounts and see what's going on and then start to implement that across the board.
Yeah, classic example there. I think we've seen teams who've spun up an Elasticsearch cluster and put one record in it and just left it alone, like $6,000 a month of Elasticsearch cluster not really doing anything, or sort of being used like maybe for configuration, but literally configuration that could have been in a text file instead. That was pretty fun. What about sort of, I guess, really frequent things? What's the most common thing to find in a sort of cost management domain?
These days, the things I see a lot of is probably, again, snapshots, but also EBS volumes. I mean, these are common topics, but it's things that a combination of idle volumes that are just sitting there burning money, ones that are oversized, and also the wrong type. So something I've learned a lot recently while working at AWS is the kind of looking into detail about what you've chosen for what service. So I mentioned in the talk about the moving from GP2 to GP3 being like a nice kind of easy saving, and looking at the calculations behind that has been really interesting. But also things like moving from IO1 to GP3. So people are provisioning these gigantic volumes. Oh, my power's coming back. Gigantic volumes and attaching kind of extra IOPS that they're not really needing. And then once we review this, we can kind of say, well, you don't actually need that much. Why don't we move you down to like just a GP3, and it being quite a common saving that maybe not going to be like the most dramatic, but it's kind of constant across the board.
Yeah, gotcha. And final question, I guess, for you in the dark over there. What's the worst thing you've seen? Like, the most sort of heinous. Or I guess, is that the same as the biggest win, maybe?
Well, okay, so my favorite one is, I won't say who this was, but they were spending, I think it was like $100,000 a year on CloudTrail. And if you don't know, the first CloudTrail you get is free because it is like an auditing tool. We give it to you for free, but any additional ones cost money on the amount of data that you monitor through it. And the fact that they had so many accounts that had about 3 or 4 in them meant that we're all logging the same thing. No one was even looking at the other ones. We were all using the organization level trail. Just meant that there was just so much extra data being stored, and we were paying out the nose for this thing that nobody was even using. So we did like another win. We did a massive cleanup of that and saved money instantly. But it was just, that was a lack of knowledge situation where they didn't know that they cost money. And it wasn't until we kind of looked at that spike that you go past the EC2, the RDS, the S3, what's left, and it comes down to, why are we spending money on CloudTrail? So yeah, that was a bit of a crazy thing. So check your CloudTrail bills.
Yep. Good advice. It
It's
is
my
always the we
recommendation.
didn't know that is usually the sort of the reason for it, right? Or the kind of the like you say with volumes, the over provisioning because it's probably going to need all of those IOPS. Maybe not. There is a question from the channel that I'm going to throw at you as well, Steph, which is are there any plans to consider memory usage when suggesting right sizing resources? Is that something that you know anything about?
I can't comment on that. I don't know. But suggest it. I mean, if there's something you guys want, then raise one of those product features and suggest it in there. I think that Compute Optimizer covers quite a lot of things, and so do right sizing in Cost Explorer. But if there's something you think is missing, then if you have a TAM, bring it up. But also, if you can get access to your support console and raise a PFR, then I'll keep my eye out for it.
Yep, good stuff. Yeah, I think the memory usage is more difficult because you have to measure it from inside the instance, and so Cost Explorer doesn't necessarily see any of that stuff. You have to surface it through CloudWatch. So, but certainly seems like the sort of thing that would be valuable. So, Flupstick, I think there on the chat. Do get in touch with your account managers. They are there for you at Amazon to do your bidding. So. Do ask those questions of them. Just to close the loop on what I was talking about while Steph was incommunicado for a minute there. I was talking about cloud custodian. Someone's reminded me that it was Capital One, so I was correcting my guess that it was one of those credit card people. The cloud custodian allows you, similar to AWS config, to fire events on particular conditions, and so you can scan your landscape, and anything that doesn't conform correctly to your tagging policy, it can just turn off or otherwise quarantine. So we've seen that in big companies do reasonably well. I think that might be all doable with config these days, but Cloud Custodian was very useful a couple of years ago for that sort of thing. Cool. Thanks, Steph. Great having you with us, and well done for styling out a power cut in the middle of our conversation. Thanks for joining us. Do stick around in the Twitch chat and chat with the community if you'd like. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.